We're here at the 9th session of the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. The Permanent Forum is a mechanism through which the Indigenous world is given a voice at the United Nations. This 9th session is dedicated to considering the question of development with culture and identity. I'm sitting here with Professor Stephen Gonzalez, who is the Baha'i delegate to the Permanent Forum. He's also a professor of law at the Phoenix School of Law. So welcome, Professor Gonzalez. Thank you for speaking with us today.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here, Julia.
Thank you. And I know you've been coming for the past 6 years, so this will be an opportunity to look back, consider how the forum has evolved, and then think about it, what it is like this year in the present. So perhaps a good place to start is to think about the evolution of the forum and maybe some of the early dynamics and areas of focus, and then what it has matured into today.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to be here. It's a real pleasure, and I get to see some old friends and make some new ones. And it's always very exciting because the Indigenous Forum brings people, as the UN in general does, of course, from all over the world. But in particular, the diversity among the indigenous peoples of the world is absolutely fascinating. It's a real joy to be here. I think you're right. There has been some evolution, some development, some change here at the forum this year, and it's rather exciting to see. We've I think it seems to be transitioning from the early days when the forum was focused on just recognition and being seen as having a voice in the United Nations community, and also kind of the early days of activism, of development of the Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which was passed a couple years ago by most of the nations of the world. That kind of early phase seems to be transitioning now and maturing toward implementing and really kind of the nuts and bolts of how can we really change and affect and progress in the indigenous world. And what's even more exciting, I think, is to learn how much the indigenous world can give back to the rest of the world.
The other interesting connection about speaking about it today is that, of course, it's April 22nd and it's Earth Day being celebrated around the world, and this is a theme so close to the minds and hearts of Indigenous people. So I wonder if you could also talk about the link there and the very unique spiritual perspective that the Indigenous communities around the world bring to all sorts of issues at discussion at the UN.
The linkage between the indigenous world and the natural world and the world of spirituality, I think, is absolutely fascinating. It's something that we, I think, are learning more and more about. I would start off by saying, though, I think it's something that historically was shared by peoples from all around the world. I think it was a universal trait. Mm-hmm. But somehow with industrialization in the last 150, 200 years, some of that was lost or forgotten in many parts of the world. Urbanization and wage earning and transformation of lifestyles from being close to the earth during the agrarian ages was a natural or unnatural change compared to the way humanity had lived for so many millennia. Whereas indigenous peoples, in general, of course there's many exceptions, but in general, indigenous peoples around the world are still very close to the earth, and by oral history and almost by intuition, they still have that connection. And so they see the earth, the sky, the development, family life, all of these things in a way that is so organic and seamless that it really calls to mind I think some of the origins of Earth Day here as we observe now the 40th anniversary of the first Earth Day. The linkage between the organic recognition of the unity of nature, the oneness of peoples around the earth, I think, is absolutely fascinating. You know, there's no doubt that with the change in the economy in recent years worldwide, the decline in the economies of the world, that the indigenous peoples tend to be some of the most vulnerable populations on Earth. And they certainly have suffered greatly. And as if to remind us of humanity's oneness, when disease hits, for example, because of lack of health care, one part of the world, it doesn't recognize borders. It doesn't stop at a particular locale because of it's only these people. It transitions everywhere. And also the damage to the environment, all of these things that have been waves of secondary effects from the economy declining. It certainly highlights the vulnerability of those populations. But on this time of celebrating Earth Day, to me, what's particularly meaningful is to think about those things that the indigenous peoples of the world can contribute. Someone once described the growth, rebirth even of indigenous populations in recent decades as a symphony getting ready. And there's different parts of the symphony. There's the brass and percussion, and there's the strings and the like. And it's okay if at first, early on, one group needs to kind of go off and rehearse and get better in preparation for the day when they can contribute their imperative piece to the entire symphony. And I think that's kind of what's happening with indigenous populations right now. There's a development process that is going on. And that, one of the things that I think that we will soon, I hope, come to recognize in the world is that the indigenous populations are not just a suffering group of human beings for which we need the help. And that certainly is the case. But there is something deeply and profoundly spiritual and powerful that they can contribute to the advancement of civilization everywhere. And part of that, I think, grows from this this memory that they hold of oneness with the earth. Who would have thought, for example, that the grains of sand, ordinary sand in the beach, that in the silica, was the secret of computers, of the microchip, that from that humble little piece of earth came the power to hold vast amounts of information and the power to move toward artificial intelligence, toward rapid communication, toward rapid calculation, all of these things that computers can contribute to the world from a natural organic piece or once organic, I guess you can call it, mineral of the earth. And I think similarly, the respect and insight for the earth that indigenous populations can help teach us will lead to similar discoveries. I mean, how much else is there on the earth that science just hasn't discovered yet? The wonders that are hidden all around us. And so, beyond just a good-hearted respect for the earth, it's in our best interests for the advancement of civilization.